Hey guys, so I think it's time for an updated eyebrow routine, right? Yeah, I think so. And I did a shortened version in one of my recent videos, but I thought I would do a separate video so it can be a reference point for anyone who's looking for an eyebrow routine, how I do my brows and how I groom them. So I'm gonna go through how I groom my brows with you guys, and then I'm gonna go through how I fill them in. And this is how I fill them in every day, whether I'm doing a natural look or I'm doing a more complex, intense look. And I'll go ahead and leave a list in the description of products used in the tutorial just in case you miss what I use. So definitely check below if you're interested in seeing what I used, and if you want to see how I did my brows, then stay tuned for the tutorial and I'll talk to you soon. So before I start filling in my brows, I like to do some grooming, and since I have the shape that I do want for my brows, I do have a pretty defined shape and they naturally grow in that way. I'm just gonna brush through them with a toothbrush just to brush them into place so I can see any excess hairs that I need to trim or tweeze. Then I'll grab my tweezers, and this is the Tweezerman slanted pointed tip tweezers, which are great for grabbing onto any stray hairs, and it's pointed so you get a nice grip onto really fine hairs. And I'm just gonna tweeze any hairs that have grown in at the base of my brows, so any overgrown hair I'll go ahead and tweeze. And my hairs are pretty thick, so they can be a little bit stubborn to tweeze, so I have to pull sometimes. So I try to keep my skin taut so I don't pull too much. And then I'll go at the top and also tweeze around the arch in case there are any stray hairs above that as well. And one tip I have is, if you don't have the desired shape of your brows set just yet, or you're growing in your brows, you're going to want to fill them in before you groom and tweeze, because this way you will maintain the shape and the growth that you want without inadvertently or mistakenly tweezing hairs that you actually want to stay. So fill them in first to your desired shape and then tweeze any hairs that are outside of the shape. So once I'm done tweezing my brows, I'm going to see if I need to trim any of the hairs. So first I brush the inner part of my brows upwards, so straight upwards. And again, this is just a toothbrush that I use specifically for my brows. And then for the arch and the tail end of my brows, I brush them in the direction of growth, because this way you don't over trim and leave gaps of hair missing. And then once I do that, I'm going to run along the tops of my brow parallel and trim any of the excess hair that grow above where the brow lines start. Never be tempted to brush the brow hairs downwards and trim that excess, because that actually forms your brow and gives it a fuller effect. So you never want to trim the hairs there, because then it's going to leave bald spots. So leave the arch and the tail end of your brow pretty untouched, and just work with the front of the brows only. And either way, you're able to tame those hairs using brow gel. And then we can go ahead and start working on filling in the brows. And the first thing I do before I moisturize my face or anything is grab some eyeshadow primer. And I'm just gonna mention what I use here, even though I'm not in love with the customer service that this company provides. I'm using the eyeshadow helper from Lime Crime. This eyeshadow primer is actually really great for this trick because it's very dry. It dries down clear, and it leaves your brows really dry and tacky, so that it grabs onto the eyebrow products that you're going to apply, and it really makes your brows stay in place all day. And once I apply that, I'm going to brush through the hairs of my brow to make sure the product is evenly distributed and there's no excess product. Now I'm sure you all know this by now, but my brow pencil of choice is the Brow Wiz from Anastasia, Beverly Hills. And I absolutely love this pencil because it has a very fine tip, so it's easy to control just how much product I put down, and it's also a very dry product, so I am not smearing eyeshadow pencil all over my eye. I can control where I put this down, and it looks more natural because it's matte rather than shiny. And the first thing I'm gonna do is outline the top of my brow and the tail end. So I just create the shape that I want first, and by outlining, and I'm just dragging this pencil along to create the outline. Then once we have the outline, I'm going to go in now and just do flicking motions just to pull some of the product through the actual sparse areas. And I'm doing very light strokes to create a hair-like appearance and texture to the brows. So I'm not pressing and pulling, I'm just barely touching the pencil down and pulling it through the sparse areas. And so you'll get a very soft hair-like effect. So I'm doing that even at the middle of my brow and just feathering that through, doing very light motions. As you can see, I'm doing kind of upwards flicking motions to create those hair-like strokes. And then at the arch, I can do a more pressing motion to create that defined shape. So when you want to create a defined line, you can press and pull, and then when you want to do hair-like effect, you can just do quick strokes through, light strokes through, to really create hair-like effect. Now I don't pull the product all the way through the beginning of my brow, because for that I like to use a brush, and this is my Polidorf Eye Definer brush, and all I'm doing now, I'm not using any product on the actual brush, I'm just using the product that is already in the brows and feathering it through the start of the brow. And this is going to give us that nice faded semi-ombre effect that looks a lot more natural. And I'm also using the brush to go through the rest of the brow hairs just to make sure the product is softened and it doesn't look unnatural. Now I'm going to go in and fill in the second brow just so I can make sure that they're not symmetrical. They don't need to be twins, but they do need to be close cousins. So I'm just going to go in again and fill in this shape. I'm creating the arch first, and then going above the brow, I'm going to make sure that I have a nice defined shape at the very top. Then create that defined tail shape and extend it to where I want it to be. And then again go through and do the light strokes to create the hair-like effect through the brows. And my second brow is actually easier to fill in than my first, so there's not much to do there. Again, I'm going in with the brush and just feathering through the start of the brow so it's nice and faded and it doesn't look too harsh. Now I always take a step back just to look at the brows to make sure they have a pretty uniformed shape. And then I'll go back in with a little bit of brow powder. Instead of using an eyeshadow, I like to use my brow powder duo from Anastasia, which I absolutely love because the colors are very hair-like. So they're not going to be too brown or too red or too yellow. They're more of an ashen tone, so they mimic hair a lot better. And I'm just going to work that through the start of my brow using the same Polidorf Eye Definer brush. And I'm just using the powder now to create a much softer effect, because powders will give you a soft effect and pencils will give you a harsher effect. So I like to use powder if I'm filling in the start of my brow and just really fade that in so it looks nice and natural. Now I like to step back and go through my brows using a spoolie brush, and this is just the spoolie end of the Anastasia Brow Wiz, and I love that it has that extra tool on the opposite end, and I'm just working through the brows so I create a very soft effect. So I'm diffusing both the brow pencil and the powder through it so it doesn't look too harsh. And I'm also combing the brow hairs into place to make sure that I have a nice filled in effect. And once that's done, I like to just take my fingers and push up at the very start of my brow at the base of the brow so that I kind of wipe away some of that excess product so that part looks very faded and natural. And that's just something I like to do. Then I'm just gonna grab my clear brow gel from Anastasia Beverly Hills again, and I swear I'm not sponsored by her. I just happen to love her brow products, and I think she makes some of the best brow products on the market. So I'm just using this brow gel to set my brow hairs in place. Remember I told you if you have overgrown brow hairs, just brush them into place. This will keep them from going all wonky and getting all over the place and being unruly. This really tames the hairs and sets them in a nice shape, and it will not move throughout the day. So that's what I'm gonna do, just to set all the hairs in place and create that shape that I want. Now normally if I wasn't wearing any makeup or doing any eyeshadow, I wouldn't do the next step. I would leave the brows as is. But since I'm going to do some eyeshadows, I'm going to grab some concealer. And this is the Pro Longwear Concealer from MAC. And it's in the shade NW35. And I find it to be a great highlight. And then I'm grabbing my number 18 brush from Anastasia. Yes, I know, don't say it. And I'm just going to apply this concealer directly under my brows. And this is going to clean up the shape underneath the brows. So any mistakes that you made, if you didn't get precise enough, this is now going to go ahead and sharpen up the shape. And it's also good to cover up any fine brow hairs that are growing out that you didn't quite get to tweeze. And this will really camouflage and conceal those brow hairs so they don't show up and have your brows looking very unruly. So just apply that concealer and feather it downwards. Then I'm just grabbing a fluffy synthetic buffing brush, and this is the Real Techniques Deluxe Crease brush. I'm just going to blend out the harsh lines from that concealer so it doesn't look so unnatural. And again, if the start of your brows look a little bit too defined and a little bit too perfect, go ahead and rough those up a little bit just using your fingers so it doesn't look quite as defined and plastic. It looks a little bit more natural. So there you go. Those are my brows completely filled in. And I love how natural they look even though they have a really defined shape. They still look full and natural and not overdone. And one tip is not to apply concealer on the top of your brows because that is just going to look too overdone unless you're going for that draggish look. Otherwise, just keep the concealer on the bottom of the brow just to clean up the shape and conceal hairs. But just leave the top bare and make it flow more naturally with your face. So there you go, guys. That's how my brows are done, and hopefully you enjoyed this video and picked up some tips and tricks. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to leave them below. And if you like this video, then definitely hit thumbs up, favorites, and share with your friends. And you know, I'll leave my links to my Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook page as well so you can follow along. So until my next video, I'll talk to you soon. Love you. Bye.